Welcome to a special edition of Behind the Numbers. This is a special episode. It's a baseball report episode. As you guys know, I have my football podcast, Behind the Numbers, doing my weekly updates and weekly hobby values for football. I am very invested and very interested in baseball, so I do like to do my baseball rookie reports. And instead of coming out with an article this year, just doing a pure video this time. It's been great to look over. It's been to see the pop reports, to see how that's affecting wax prices. Are we in a junk slab era? All these questions are just great to just ask and have a conversation about. And to do that, I wanted to bring on one of my good friends. I would say it's funny because I think social media kind of gets a bad rap, but I think in the hobby, it's been great for meeting people. And my buddy Rob has his own Flagship Rookie Card Podcast. Him and I talk daily. We've never met in the flesh, but it's been a great hobby friendship. And I'm excited to bring Rob onto the show and take a crack at this baseball report and just update everybody on what's going on in the baseball world. But how are you?
I'm good, Tyson. How are you?
Good. So Rob, just a little bit about his podcast. He is on episode 18 with 19 coming on Monday. Yep. His show is focused on baseball numbers in terms of pop reports, values, rookie card specific. But go ahead. Do you want to elaborate on your show just a little bit, Rob, and then we can get to the business?
For sure. Yeah, you covered it well. I sort of try to quantify everything on that show, every sort of little idea that the hobby has and every, thing that the assumptions people make about value and about where things are going and just try to assign a number to almost everything. And sometimes, I take it a little bit too far. I've had some listeners tell me that it's just half an hour of me spitting out numbers, but I do my best. Recently as well, I've had some really great feedback and trying to get things a little bit more verbal and less robotic. But it's a fun show, and like you said, we're covering rookie cards and what the market is doing and how to best spend your money in this hobby, basically.
Definitely. And I think maybe that's why I like your show so much, being, a math teacher and a math mind myself. I don't mind the just pure numbers, but when you are reading it, as I do it for my show, you just feel so boring. It's almost like my math teacher on the podcast. And I'm trying to get away from that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm trying to enjoy myself. So, so let's get to it. So what we're going to do with the show today is that I've done my 3 checkpoints for rookie card values. I did preseason, All-Star break, and now, and we're going to put these up. We're going to do the top 5. Then we're going to do 6 through 10, all the way down to the top 20. Nice. What I want to do is I want to look at the pop reports. I want to talk about surprising values, just what we see from this list. And then I also just want to kind of just pay attention to 2018 and on and under 2018, because it seems like there is a little bit of movement in the pre-2018 cards, which is good for we could say the market, because it means showing there is some value on scarcity. So I'm going to put this up here, and we are just going to get right to the first list. So here's the top 5. So I'll just kind of read through the top 5. We got Mike Trout, Pujols, Kershaw, Miguel Cabrera, and Max Scherzer. Not one player is later than 2011 on this list. You can see the pop reports has the highest with Mike Trout. You can see that Albert Pujols is at 11% gem rate. When looking at this list, like, kind of what stands out to you the most, Rob, when just looking at the top 5?
I mean, that Pujols 229 number is bonkers, really. Like, I think, the last part of his career has been kind of ugly a little bit. He just sort of doesn't, no one would look at that guy and think this is one of the greatest players of all time. But numbers wise, he really is. Like, when he goes into the Hall of Fame and is, guaranteed first ballot, he will be going in as one of the greatest Hall of Famers in baseball history. And for there to be only 229 PSA 10s, I mean, that's nuts, really.
That's nuts. And they have 11% gym rate. So if there's raws lying around, it's not a good shot they're going to gym either.
No.
And I mean, that's something to consider too. And so, just forgetting, since we're doing the video format, we will have this out in podcast form. So we'll do the best to read the numbers, but right now we're displaying a slide with the top 5 values. So let me just kind of run through the values real quick for the listeners that are not seeing the video. Mike Trout's 28.50 right now. He's down from 43.51 preseason, so that's quite the drop. I think that can be more market and obviously injury a little bit, but we can talk about the market part of it. Pujols, 26.25. He's down from 3,500 preseason. Kershaw, 930. Didn't have him in my preseason list, but he's up $30 from the All-Star break. Miguel Cabrera, 657. He's up from 472 at the All-Star break. I also forgot to include him in the preseason. And then Max Scherzer, 643. He was at 330 at the All-Star break. So that's interesting to talk about. Is that all market there going to the Dodgers? He just got a bunch of love real quick, or was he just really low, too low to begin with?
I think he must have been too low to begin with. I mean, nothing has changed really for him. He already had his 3 Cy Youngs. He got his 3,000 strikeouts this year. So I can't remember exactly when that happened. It would have been later in the season, so that may have been it.
Right.
Because I think he's at like 3,020 or something very close to 3,000. So it may be the 3,000K mark, but I mean, he was already, in my opinion, a first ballot Hall of Famer before he
Right.
got traded. So I'm not sure, but that's really interesting that he went so far against what the market was doing. Because since the
Yeah.
All-Star break, we've just been straight down.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think it is a combination. He was like underpriced. I think the Nationals are kind of reeling. Like nobody's really paying attention to him. Going the
Yeah,
Dodgers instantly their guy. They're going to ride to the playoffs, and he got all the. He was the. I mean, he pitched a lot. Like he was.
he did. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's getting a lot of numbers. Who do you like between Kershaw and Scherzer, kind of long term? Because they're 643 for Scherzer, 930 for Kershaw. Pop's relatively close within about 200 cards. I just like, for me, I'll just kind of start, and you have the numbers part. That's why I love having you on the show.
Yeah.
Just seems like Kershaw hasn't been dominant for a long time. It
Yeah.
seems like he's always been kind of hung up with injuries, or they're just trying to use him the best way they can. He did have a phenomenal stretch, but it does seem like Scherzer has the longevity, in my view, from just a pure fan standpoint. What is your take?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, Kershaw has to be my favorite pitcher to watch. When you watch him, there's just something special going on when he's pitching. But like you said, I mean, he just can't stay healthy, and it just it seems like every year for the last 5, even 6 years, he's just had something going on. And Scherzer just is a machine. If you look at their sort of Hall of Fame credentials, Scherzer has enough WAR to get in. He's got the peak WAR already to get in. Like these guys both already are in that regard. Scherzer has 3,000 strikeouts. Kershaw doesn't. He's only about 400 away. So I mean, you'd think that he will, eventually get there. But I would go with Scherzer here for sure. I mean, that $300 difference. It really has to be just a sentimental thing that people, like Kershaw more. I mean, so I
Right.
didn't look at this. The pop report's almost identical as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would definitely go with Scherzer. That if the gap closes, maybe it closes the other way. Kershaw comes down, but
Mhm.
if it closes with Scherzer going up, he has all the same credentials as Clayton Kershaw does.
Yeah, and maybe these recent sales with Scherzer. I mean, I can't confirm that these are after him signing with the Mets, but the Mets market gets bumped. Lindor got a bump a little bit, even though he wasn't playing great. He got a bump,
Yeah.
just going to the Mets. So that could be baked into why Scherzer's jumped a bit. I think Kershaw might have a little bit of value too, Rob, just because he's been with the Dodgers the whole time, and so he's in that market the whole time. His rookie cards, that
For sure.
jersey, people
Yeah.
like that aesthetically for sure.
Yeah.
And of these 5 guys, Rob, and then if you want to maybe just give us a little bit of perspective from your show, I know you're big on targeting guys that are going to the Hall of Fame for value.
Mhm.
All 5 of these guys, Hall of Famers in your mind, and maybe just kind of talk to us about your angle with that within the hobby.
All 5 of them for sure are Hall of Famers. The only guy that I would say it might not be a first ballot Hall of Famer is Miggy.
Okay.
And he's really close. I mean, one thing I try to distinguish between on my show is who is a first or second ballot Hall of Famer, and then who's a Hall of Famer. Because people get into the Hall of Fame who don't have the kind of statistics that do anything for us in the hobby. People like Harold Baines or Jack Morris, or they get sent in on a committee vote, or even someone like Edgar Martinez, who's gets him on his 10th vote.
Right.
So we on the show, I really focus on just first ballot guys or second, or guys who should have been first ballot guys. And I think Miggy right now has a lot of helium behind him, and I think the the Triple Crown Award also really puts a lot of air behind him.
Yeah.
But if you're really just mathematical about it and look at his numbers, he's really on the bubble for being a Hall of Famer. He's not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
He has a few seasons left still, but he doesn't seem to be performing at a level that's going to add anything to the argument.
Okay.
In my opinion, the other 4 guys, Kershaw and Scherzer, there are no pitchers who have won 3 Cy Young awards that are not in the Hall of Fame, except for Roger Clemens. So that third that third Cy Young award is really like that's your ticket in. It
Gotcha.
seems to be. But I think that's why DeGrom this year, halfway through the year, his card prices were just rocketing up. The market
Right.
was going down, and he was going straight up, and it seemed like he was on pace for his third. And
Yeah.
then when he got injured, it just completely dropped. Right? It's like
Right.
he's not a different guy, but the
Right.
opportunity to win the third Cy Young disappeared.
And he should get it if we can get that health back. We'll get to
For
DeGrom on
sure.
the next set. But the last question of the top five before we move on to the 6 through 10 group is, the Mike Trout conversation. He's always been the standard for the rookie cards. I think a lot of people, in my mind, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people, when they get that Soto or they get that Acuna, which isn't relative now, they're like, well, if he's the next Trout, man, this is a $3,000 card. And
Yeah.
Trout's come down. He's down at 28.50, which I think is a little bit more reasonable. But I guess my question is, preseason was definitely, the market was still kind of semi-peak, not even quite peak. It was even a little bit higher than that. And it's come down. He's come down almost 50%. Is this normal? And is he, since he's first ballot Hall of Famer and the talent he brings, is he like priced appropriately in your mind?
So I think I would have said yes. I mean, the drop to me is just market related. It seems like, everywhere I look, it's about 50%. So Trout being down 50% is, I wouldn't be scared of that part. But I was doing a little bit of research for my show based on some of the stuff that you had presented to me. And one of the things I found was, so Ken Griffey Jr.'s market cap. And so his grading is a bit weird. He has hardly any tens and then a ton of eights and nines. But if
Mm-hmm.
you add up all of them, eights, nines, and tens, his market cap is only 18 million. And I think you said Mike Trout is
15.8 million for just his
15.8
PSA
million.
10s, though, just for his PSA 10s. But yeah,
Right. So he's already basically there's as much money in Trout, or almost as much money in Trout as there is in the top three Ken Griffey Jr. graded cards.
yeah,
Um, which I wonder about, like, Ken Griffey Jr. is one of the most beloved baseball players in history, and
right,
Mike Trout isn't, right? He's from a number standpoint and whatever, he's clearly one of the greatest players who's ever lived, but he's sort of lacking in personality. He doesn't, he's not a guy that people flock to. So I
right.
just looking at the market cap, I wonder about that number. It is an iconic card, but so is the Griffey. So yeah, I thought I had a strong opinion on that. I thought that it was a great price, but I'm gonna waffle a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think in my mind, like when I compare it to Soto, like Soto's PSA 10, and right now Soto's our young version of the next big thing, I would say safely,
Yeah,
based on his numbers and his consistent output. And his market cap's at 2.9 million just for his PSA 10 base update.
yeah,
I think that 5 times is a lot. But at the same time, for me, I think it's kind of the deciding factor is if we don't see peak Trout again, then yeah, I think it's overpriced. But if
mm,
he puts together like a next year, finally a full season of health, and he puts up a Trout type season, then I think it's a 28.50 is respectable. But that's the if, right? I don't know, it's been 3 years since he's had a full healthy season,
I think
and
that's right. Yeah,
I think to me that's the biggest concern is we fell in love with prime Trout, but we haven't seen prime Trout for so long. So what do we really have here?
yeah.
And I think that's to me is what's going to answer that question.
Mm.
Awesome. All right. So going to 6, I got a little fold there with the bets there, but one thing I thought was interesting as we talk about 6 through 10, we have, what was it, 4 pitchers and 2 catchers in the top 10, but I
Yeah.
thought we're not supposed to collect pitchers and catchers, Rob. So what's up with that?
It's a great, yeah. Um, it's a great question. I mean, so the catchers, I think, are special. We can maybe
Mhm.
talk about them separately, and then the pitchers. I mean, the thing with pitchers is it's what we're talking about with Kershaw, right? I mean, he managed to put up the numbers, but then in the last 5 years of his career, he's just in a wheelchair half the time, and that is relatively common, I would say, is that a pitcher, gets an injury of some sort. I think Kershaw's got a back problem, right? And it just, imagine a pitcher with a back problem. Like, that's just not a good thing.
Right.
Um, and the other thing about pitchers is that they come up late. They tend to come up late.
Right.
So, someone like Shane Bieber, for example, I think he came up when he was 24, 25. And so if he doesn't get going immediately, which usually pitchers don't, usually pitchers take a couple of years to get going. Look at like Corbin Burns, right
Hmm.
now. So they often will come up late and then lose their first 2 years just being sort of mediocre, and then figure something out and then be amazing. And so the amount of time that they have to put up the numbers to build a floor big enough to get into the Hall of Fame, I think is troublesome, and that's the problem. I can't remember when these guys came up, but I believe that all three of those guys came up relatively early.
Yeah.
And then Degrom actually doesn't have anywhere near the kind of like total numbers of a Hall of Fame pitcher, but his core, like his peak numbers, are like
Insane.
honestly some of the
Yeah.
best in history. I
Right.
did a thing on the show once with comparing him to Sandy Koufax, and he came out on top.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's
I listened to that episode. That was crazy. Yeah.
yeah,
I think one thing I noticed with these four pitchers, besides DeGrom, but Verlander, Scherzer, and Kershaw have all been locked in ones, no doubters for a solid chunk of time. I know Kershaw has had injuries, but Verlander's been an ace forever. Like he's,
totally. Yeah.
and so I think that kind of stuff matters. And then Verlander's also been in pretty good markets like Detroit, to Houston. Like
Yeah.
Houston's not like an awesome market because of trash can gate and all that stuff, but I still think that he's been always in competitive teams, and that also matters, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
But I just think it's just funny when you always hear the no catchers, no pitchers, and we're looking at the top 10 and we got 60% is catchers and pitchers.
Yeah.
I think Posey's jumped up because of his retirement. I think people want to get some of his cards because he's had a really respectable catching career.
Yeah.
And then, Yachty's just been, I think he's kind of a beloved player. I mean, he hasn't been an amazing hitter. He's been a solid hitter, but a great defensive guy and just a great leader for the Cardinals. And I think he's more of a face of a franchise type guy that people just, I don't think he's going to be a first ballot or anything, is he?
Well, this was another thing I've sort of uncovered recently. Is I was trying to look at whether MVPs matter and things like that, and from my research they don't. But what I did find is that the number of Silver Slugger and Gold Glove awards that Hall of Fame hitters have is significantly higher than a normal player. And then in particular, the guys who tend to be on the bubble, the guys who don't have the stats to necessarily get in without a bump, those guys have even higher amounts of Silver Sluggers and Gold Gloves. And Yachty has 8 combos between them. They call them the Silver and Gold Club, which is huge. Like it's an enormous number. And that means that 8 times in his career he was either the best defensive or best offensive catcher in the National League. So when I was sort of doubtful about him as well, but when I saw that number, I thought, well, that kind of changes this argument a little bit.
Yeah.
The Hall of Fame is all about how good you were against your peers in that time.
Yeah.
Right. And he's got 8 awards that say he was the best at something.
Right.
During his career. So I think he actually could be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think Buster Posey will be. He doesn't really have, he just has the love, he's just such a good guy. And he's been on the Giants his whole career. And I think I read something at one point where some Hall of Fame guy with a ballot was saying that this is everyone's favorite catcher right now.
Right.
And so when the time comes to tick that box, it'll get ticked. So
Yep.
But numbers-wise, he doesn't have it.
One thing that I thought was pretty interesting with Posey is he sat out the COVID year, and then he came back. He was really good this year.
It's amazing.
He was amazing this year. So, to me, that was pretty dang impressive to sit out a year and come back and be. I mean, fantasy-wise, I know because I had him. He was great.
Yeah.
Let's go through the values here again for the listeners that aren't seeing our grid here. So Yachty's right now is 517 for his PSA 10. Verlander's 332. DeGrom's down to 280. He was at 450 preseason. As you talked about, his build was up to 675 for All-Star break, down to 280. So he's had quite the roller coaster this year. Buster Posey up to 268. Mookie 250. And that's just so crazy to see his 840 preseason sale. I mean, that's Mookie's very interesting topic. Speaking of that, let's just talk about Mookie for a second. How do you feel about Mookie long term? Where do we go with Mookie?
So I feel like I have a Mookie bias, and I wonder how many people have it too. In my head, he is always injured.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at his stats, he's not always injured. So I don't know why I think that. his numbers are crazy. I mean, he's absolutely on the path to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He has had a few little injury bugs here and there, but he's not a guy who's missed a lot of games or anything like that. So he's a guy that confuses me because I can't seem to get over my own bias on it, and I wonder if a lot of the hobby also thinks that he's just a little bit frail. It might be maybe
Hmm.
because his size, maybe I don't know what it is about him, but
Yeah.
you know, he just looks like a little skinny guy
Yeah.
in a sport full of monsters right now. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, that price seems amazing. Like I remember at the beginning of the season, everybody was falling over themselves for Mookie rookies.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely. And people are paying up for those too. Like
yeah,
everyone get
totally.
every raw chance they can.
Yeah. What do you
Um,
think?
I worry a little bit about him just in the sense that when you put that kind of money into a guy
Hmm.
and they still go out and make a trade for Trey Turner, Bellinger dropped off. It just doesn't seem like is he the guy? Because to me, if he's not the guy, then we can't ever see that 840 again.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem I have right now. I just don't think he, at least this last year, and this is just 1 year, I just didn't think he performed as a top five. He was a top five fantasy pick. I don't think he performed that way. And if he
Hmm.
can't put up those type of numbers, then I think that right around where he's at right now is probably where he's going to be. And he's kind of where he's at right now because his pop's only 3,000 still.
Yeah.
So he still has pretty good scarcity.
Yeah.
Speaking of those pop numbers, the top 10, so nice tidbit for the listeners here, the top 10 all added up are 16,703 cards that are PSA 10 for the top 10, which is not bigger than Acuna, Tatis, or Soto by themselves. So that's if you're wondering why we haven't seen a 2018 player yet, this is why. The scarcity is just not there, and the scarcity is here. And when I look at Yachty's numbers here, hit 263. There's probably a lot of Yachty's in people's shoeboxes somewhere that they
Yeah.
forgot about. So when you can see the 29% gem rate, he wasn't stored away safely. So check your boxes for Yachty Molina rookies out of 2004 tops.
It's a very cool card too. You showed me that card last week. It's an
Yeah,
amazing card.
very cool card, definitely. All right, so we got next one, 11 through 15 here. So now we start to see some of those after 2018 guys. First off is Vlad with his 2019 series. Remember, we do the no number for this list, as I view that as his real rookie card. Right now, that's at 220. Freddie Freeman's moved up, obviously, after his great World Series and playoff run. His 2011 tops is 215. Bryce Harper, I want to talk about him quite a bit because I think he's an interesting price. His 2012 updates 170. Juan Soto's at 157, and Otani's down to 130. With this group, it's a very polarizing group. I feel like you have Harper,
Definitely.
Soto, Otani, and Vlad, four
Yeah.
guys that just people want all over the place, right? And
Yeah.
let's talk about Otani first, Rob. Like, why
Okay.
he won MVP? Why did he go from 220 to 130?
I
What do you
think
think?
that's a great question. I'm not sure I have an answer for that. He is a weird one. He's so polarizing. Maybe he just shot up too fast, too high. Maybe
Yep.
that distance from the $45 preseason price to 220
Yep.
was just too much, and people started taking profits. That's a tough one. He is such a hard player to understand in terms of baseball cards. It's really
Yeah.
crazy. What do you think?
I have a couple takes on it. I think, yeah, the 45 was insane. He was at rock bottom. So then we overcorrected to 220 and kind of maybe settle. I think 130 is a bit low.
Mhm.
I think that Otani has the most risk of all these guys because he's only had one healthy season. And
Yeah.
so that healthy season was amazing, but it's just one. And
Mhm.
so he's the most volatile in terms of like he could really fall off. The other thing I think that people maybe don't like or why he's only have a pop of 5,555, which is respectable. But he has a lot of rookie cards. He's got a Series 2 rookie. He's got an update rookie. Like he's got two different chromes. His rookies are all over the map in 2018. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of also kind of suppresses the value a bit because they're all to have his rookie. They're not debuts in one and rookies in other. They're called all rookies. So I think
Yeah.
that kind of hurts it a bit too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think the one interesting point about him is I think that when we're looking at Soto or Guerrero or whatever, we need these guys to perform for 15 years in order to be long-term buys.
Yeah.
I think if Shohei Ohtani does what he did in 2021 for like 3 more years, he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So it's like we only need that guy to be good he has to be really good. I mean, he has to be good at a level that no one's ever done before, but for only 3 years. So I have a feeling that was one of the things that led to the big price jump, was people realizing that this is totally unprecedented what he's doing.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to get some Otani cards for a long time, and the price has just always been too high, and finally landed a few last week. But I'm done. Like I don't want to put any more into it.
Yeah. I'm so nervous about
it
it too.
Scares me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I sold one too early that I don't want to talk about, but it's definitely he's just a tough guy to invest in because you just don't know when the bomb's going to fall out for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'll just go over this quickly because I know that you feel this way, but I think Vlad's no number rookie card is going to be one of the more stable modern cards because it's not an SP. It's not a base card though. And you can see that even though the pop is 4,100, it's, that's not that high compared to everybody else around him. No. So I think Vlad's rookie card is going to be a pretty stable one. Do you agree?
100%. Yeah. That's my number one target since the season's been stopped, especially been grabbing as many PSA 9s as I can get.
Right. And then I know Bryce Harper is such an interesting case. His pop's low. He's, an MVP player, like he's 2000, like he's shown MVP style and stats, and he does all the things right in terms of that. He's only 170 and his pop's low. So It's kind of weird to see him only $13 above Soto, but he's done a lot more than Soto, I guess, other than win a championship. But what's Harper's value in your mind? Do you think that's too low? Do you think he's priced right? How do you feel about Harper?
So I took a big L on this one because for 3 or 4 episodes, I mentioned him as a great buy and, continued to do research and stuff like that. And he's always like numbers wise, just on the bubble. If you project forward, he's just on the edge of sort of Hall of Fame numbers. He's not quite there yet. You'd think if he puts together a couple great seasons, he might make it into it, but he's not there yet. And the MVP, seemed to make a big splash. But the thing that I found in doing this recent Silver Slugger Gold Glove thing was like there are 0 guys in the Hall of Fame with less than, I think it's I can't remember what the number is. It's like two or 3. But the guys in the low point are people like Chipper Jones or Jim Thome, like first ballot Hall of Famers with 500 homers and all the numbers that they need. So like they didn't need those guys. But in terms of where Harper is going to be, he's competing with guys who have a combination of like between 8 and 10 and even 12 Silver Slugger and Gold Gloves between them. If I remember correctly, Bryce Harper has 1. Mm-hmm. So he is not going to have what he needs, in my opinion, to get in if he doesn't get the numbers.
Right.
On a first ballot. I think that eventually someone puts Bryce Harper into the Hall of Fame. But maybe it's on the 8th, 9th, 10th ballot or a committee vote or something like that. But ultimately, I've changed my tune on that, and I hope not too many of my listeners listen to my first advice in buying him. But I actually think that he's a little bit overpriced at this price. I bought some. I did listen to my own advice, and I will be selling as soon as I can when the season starts.
What about like Freddie, just real quick, because he's jumped up? Is this just a hype jump? Do you think you think 215 is pretty solid for what he's done? I mean, his pop's only 1,000, so
he's sort of the same. He's on the edge of a Hall of Fame entry. I think he might be another one of these players like you were talking about with Kershaw, where every Braves fan has to have a Freddie card, or a few. And I hadn't thought of this till right now, but I wonder if Freddie signs with the Jays or something like that, if his cards drop,
right?
If the opposite of what normally happens,
right,
because he's no longer a Brave. So I would also say that one is a little bit. I mean, with the population so low, it's hard to say that that's overpriced, but it's not something that I would be searching for.
Yeah.
What do you think of those guys?
I like Freeman. It's just like he's just a stable guy. Like I don't think he's gonna ever blow the prices out of the water, but I think kind of right in that $150 to $200 range is going to be safe for him, just because he's a very likable guy too. He has he has the stuff like those shows about his kids, and he's more than just a baseball player. So I think that does matter too. Yeah. But I like Freddie Freeman. I have a PSA 9, and I'm happy just to keep that, like just because I think he's a great guy. One other thing I want to point out before we go on the next one though is Vlad. If you look, he's at a 50% gem rate. So that means there's just over 8,000 cards submitted.
Yeah.
That's really low for what's been submitted, because Soto's at 67% gem rate. So we're talking over 30,000 cards of Soto been submitted. So you're talking about a quarter of the cards for Vlad versus Soto. And I remember the Vlad cards. They all had, like, a lot of them had a rough corner. That same top right corner for Vlad had a little bit of white, whiting on it. So I think that's going to help his rookie cards again. So again, I think Vlad's a great buy. I'm with you 100% on that. And he's in a great place. He kind of has that, he could have that kind of Griffey style, right? That dad that was really good, that you got they kind of follow in the footsteps. I think that Vlad definitely is a good buy right now for sure.
Yeah, the team is looking great too now. I think we'll see them in the playoffs in the next little while. It's I mean, his prices are higher than the other guys, but the population sort of accounts for that. But it should be higher, in my opinion. That's I can't stop buying him.
There we go.
Yeah,
there we go. Perfect. Anything else on this last set, Rob? Are you good to go?
Good to go.
All right, perfect. Making good time here. All right, so then we get into the Tatis and Acuna list. So 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 here. So Tatis is at 119 right now. Acuna is at 114. Rizzo at 110. Altuve at 105. And Turner at 101. In terms of Tatis, he was 265 preseason, so he's down over 50% to 119. Acuna was 215. He's down to 115, so just a little bit under 50% drop for him. Let's talk about the big two, Acuna, Tatis. I know you have pretty strong opinions on Tatis. I'm not sure how you feel about Acuna, but we'll just go ahead and give me your overall collecting take on Tatis and Acuna.
So, I mean, the price on Tatis is bizarre. I have to say, I don't understand the drop to that level. I wonder if it's because he chose not to have surgery on his shoulder. And I have a friend who's also a collector, and he was saying that things like that, where surgery is possible, those are the injuries that are good. And if a player chooses to have it and then take care of the injury, then that's a real positive. So it's hard for me to believe that the rest of the hobby understands that, but, maybe they do.
Right.
But that price seems crazy. I mean, for me, my take on Tatis has always just been that he's just not going to stay on the field. I think when he's on the field, he's really one of the best hitters, one of the best players overall to watch. He's amazing.
Right.
I have nothing against Fernando Tatis. It's just from a card standpoint, being a little bit more, methodical and emotions aside, I think he's a terrible investment. He's never been healthy. Like, it's not even a new thing. He's had so many injuries. It's just crazy. So that price to me at 119 is an amazing opportunity, I would say, to be honest, because short-term opportunity, because he's going to do crazy things. He's going to hit 50 home runs and steal 45, 50 bases one year. There will be seasons where he looks like he might be the greatest player in history. I just don't think it's going to last.
Right.
So
he's definitely polarizing.
yeah. I don't own I have one Tatis card.
Yeah.
Acuna is the other really tough one. He with this knee injury. So I did an episode about, or that had a segment about the ACL injuries with baseball players, and the thing is that the next year is supposed to be relatively mediocre compared to his normal, to the player's normal situation. So we should actually be expecting 2022 to be a down year for Acuna, and I would say that not enough has come off that price for that expectation. So I love Acuna. I think he's, him and Soto are the sort of, and Vladdy, of course, those are the top three for me. Those are the guys that are going to, really be the special guys from this group. But I think the buying opportunity is not here yet. I think we're going to see some trouble from him in 2022. And that's when the buying opportunity will come. But it's not even 50% off what his preseason price was, and almost everybody else is. So
it was kind of interesting.
Is huge.
It was kind of interesting too, because a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, he dropped from 215 to 115 because he's injured." Not really. He got injured. He was only going for about 130, and then he's actually kind of just stayed. He didn't really go that much down with his injury. So his injury is not really affecting his price much. Again, he's a huge pop guy. He's almost at 20,000. Yeah. He's well over 30,000 cards submitted. So that's always going to cap his ceiling for sure. Yeah. And then, like you said, the worry next year, if he is mediocre, that will probably creep closer to 100, if not under $100, I'd imagine.
I think so too. Yeah, I'll be a buyer at that point. Like it's,
Yeah.
I think you'll see it at $80, at some point
Yep.
when it, but yeah, we'll see.
So
I mean, I hope he comes back and is absolutely amazing.
yeah,
Um,
he's fun to watch. Yeah.
he's just a blast. He's one of these guys too that just that did like the thing that baseball players aren't supposed to be able to do, which is that he suddenly found plate discipline. He was sort of a swing and miss guy in the minors and in his first 2 years, and then in 2020 and in 2021, he just suddenly found the strike zone, and that's so rare.
Yeah.
So I think the talent level with that guy is just off the charts.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Let's talk about these last three guys, Rizzo, Altuve, and Turner. Of those three, any of them have a Hall of Fame chance? And do you like any of those three at all within the hobby?
No, I mean, Altuve's the closest, but I'd made some. Oh yeah, he's a guy who doesn't have any silver and gold. If he's got a few silver sluggers, but he's only got one Gold Glove. For he's second base, right? For a second
Yeah.
baseman to not have a bunch of Gold Gloves, I haven't looked this up, but I'm going to guess that the second basemen in the Hall of Fame all have tons of hardware in that department.
Yeah.
He's got one. So being on the edge statistics wise, and then not having that extra little thing to push him over, plus the little whiff of cheating, I would say he's a long shot at best. And the other two, I mean, in my opinion, really have, in terms of first or second ballot, early ballot, no chance. Trey Turner's injured all the time. He's another guy like Tatis that, if he could play a full season, the numbers that he would put up would be just ridiculous.
Right.
But he can't seem to do it. He also started quite late. I think he was 26 in his rookie season. And he has 0 silver sluggers and 0 Gold Gloves as well. So for a shortstop to go into the Hall of Fame with 0 Gold Gloves, I think is also unlikely.
And then, yeah, sorry, I'd say it's where these guys' age is right now. And if this is, we're taking from what you're saying about their Hall of Fame chances, this might be like selling then, because I just don't think they're going to go anywhere. Yeah. Rizzo hasn't been good for 2 or 3 years now in terms of statistically. And then Trey Turner's in a good market now. He could have a really nice season if he stays healthy. I could see it.
Yeah.
But I mean, long term, I think that these three guys are pretty close to their cap for sure.
Definitely. The population of the Trey Turner, though, 175. I mean, he's a guy that could put up, 30-30 season, for example, or win a batting title or steal 60 bases or do something crazy. And at that pop level, that card would skyrocket, I think, if he did that. So it's a kind of an interesting flyer if you wanted to take one.
Oh, definitely. I think of the three, definitely Trey Turner would be my long shot for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. And let's go ahead and just move to Rob here. Let's talk about these kind of appalling numbers. I put these on my Twitter account. I got the slide thing in the way a little bit here, but let's see if I can. Whoops. All right. Bring it back. All right. Well, I can still see it. I'll just kind of read it. So this is what I did was I went through every year from 2011 to 2020, because that's where all of our rookie cards are from, except for I didn't get the tops traded. Those are a little bit outside of the scope. And I just wanted to figure out how many cards have been graded in those sets. And you can see it's gradually increased, as you'd expect. If we go to like 2011 update with Trout, 27,000, almost 28,000 cards have been graded. If we look at just right below there, 2018, 117,000 cards have been graded. So how do we take this information, Rob, and actually, I don't know, protect our investments or protect our cards, or I don't know what the question is in that realm, but how do we use data like this to make sure we understand what we're trying to collect?
I have been wrestling with it since you sent this to me, and it's really hard to understand, to be honest, exactly what it is we're looking at. You look at Topps update from 2020, and there's 2,600 cards graded.
Right.
If you look back, I like to look back at the Griffey card, because it's sort of like, this is the king of the sort of junk wax era. And what happened there, and the number of cards subbed from that set is way higher than anything here. And those cards, when the population is around 4,000 or 5,000, they have value, right? So and they have like solid value, Chipper Jones and Derek Jeter and all those guys. These are not inexpensive cards. So I wonder if we're maybe making a little bit too much of this, in that, like, basically what we're looking at is people being less disciplined
Hmm.
than they used to be. So, I think we were looking at like 2020, for example, and so many Kyle Lewis and um,
Yeah.
Gavin Lux and all these players that really don't really have a chance of building any kind of serious long-term floor, were graded
Right.
like huge numbers, right? 20,000 cards
Yeah.
graded of those guys. um, and I think there's obviously print runs have gone up. That's clear. I think the Chrome column is the most telling in that regard
Yeah.
of what's happened with with print runs.
Right.
Um, but I wonder if you know there are more Griffies being subbed every month than there are Sotos right now, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about, right? Griffey's from 1989, Soto's from 2018.
Hmm.
So people will just sub everything they can of a player that they like. Nothing will stop them.
Right.
um,
Except for
and
prices,
so,
but yeah.
except for when PSA closes. But so, like I said, I don't. It's really hard to process this information and make a conclusion. I have been trying to do that on my show, and I've been trying to work out what it is exactly I want to say, and I don't know what it is.
Right. Yeah.
um, I think that, like I said to you when we were chatting yesterday, I think the big interesting question is not so much the big number here, so much as what you were saying while we were going through the other cards, which is that the number of PSA 10s that Soto, Acuna, uh, Tatis, all those guys have is like 4 or 5 times what the previous generation of Hall of Famers have.
Right.
Um, and that is, I think that should worry people a little bit.
Right.
Because a Griffey 10 goes for $2,000.
Yeah.
Right. There's about 4,000 of those. And so there's 5 times as many Sotos. So where are we going?
Yeah.
He's $150 right now. If you just, obviously the math doesn't work that way, but if you just did the math, then Soto's in 30 years will be worth $400 or $500.
Right.
And you'd be better off just putting your money in the stock market and forgetting about it for 30 years.
Yeah.
So
I kind of have a couple takes. So, I mean, just so that the listeners here aren't seeing the video format, just a couple big numbers here. So, Topps 2020, so that's Series 1 and Series 2, is 135,000 cards submitted. Topps updates, almost 117,000 submitted. Topps update 2011 with Trout, like I said, almost 28,000. You look at 2014 update, so that would be Mookie and DeGrom, that's 16,000. You look at 2019 Series 2 and 1, so that Series 1 didn't have much, but Series 2 and 1 combined 84,000. So I think, to me, I think we can all agree there's been more print. I think that's pretty easy to say. There's also more parallels. So each player, as they've gotten older, has more different types of rookie cards. So no matter what happens there, that's going to suppress things in terms of value. That's just natural. But the other thing I think that comes into play in my mind is, it seems to me right around 2017, 2018 is when a lot of people came back. And then when they come back, and then all these people that have been here, they've been grading, and they see these guys, whoa, that Bellinger's $300. Okay, I'm going to sub that. And so then we have all this mass subbing for the last 3 years since 2018. And who are they going to sub? Of course, they're going to sub Acuna, Soto, and Ohtani. And of course, they're going to sub Tatis. And so that's why those numbers, I think just everybody was trying to make a lot of money. And now we have all these card values. Because 2020 to me is the perfect example of, like you said, people subbing everything and trying to make $200-$300 a card. I mean, Bo Bichette, who had a phenomenal season, PSA 10's like $50.
Yeah.
And like 2020, that's a lot of junk slab era discussion there. Because to me, there's not very many of those 2020 cards are submitted that are worth the plastic that they're in.
No.
And so now that, to me, now we're coming. So to me, it's more of a junk slab versus junk wax era thing. Because I think as long as we have enough people in the hobby to sustain the number of rookie cards, we're okay. But if the hobby gets smaller, then the rookie cards are going to plummet because we don't not people don't want them anymore.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's kind of my take on how the numbers get bigger and maybe how we can kind of navigate through that a bit.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think what you just said about the size of the hobby, I think that's really the core thing, and I do think that if we shrink even a tiniest little bit, those Bichette, Luis Robert, Gavin Lux, Kyle Lewis, like they go to zero, like they're just like you'd have to pay to get rid of them at that point because they're just already so low. Yeah, it's somewhat scary. I mean, I sort of tend to try to stay away from paper cards with big populations, just generally speaking, anyway. But I think that it'll be quite bad for the hobby if the amount of people participating in it shrink. In it, obviously, it would be bad in any environment, but in this environment in particular, it would be terrible.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think basketball would be a really big kind of case study for baseball. Baseball's always kind of had, I think, in my view of the hobby, this is just my view, baseball's had a bigger calling, a bigger group of people that are consistently baseball, because baseball's got the tradition, it's got the longevity of baseball cards. Basketball had the quick hit, right? The Zions, the Jaws, and everybody's grading everything, making a lot of money. And like, are those quick flipping idea guys that are making money in basketball, are they going to stay there? And if they don't, we see the pop reports for Prism right now where Zion's one of the most graded cards, or how far are those going to fall. So I think basketball will be a really good case study for baseball fans in terms of what's happening with the basketball card values. So 2011 Topps update wax. So I think it's also good to see wax prices is $7,000 for a wax of 2011 update. That's Trout's here. That's kind of interesting to think about because you're not guaranteed a Trout gem. So you're hoping for a Trout parallel maybe to make your money, but that wax is really expensive.
Yeah.
18 updates, still pulling $800 a box, even with the pop reports it's pulling.
Yeah.
2019 Series 2, still respectable for $400. And the last two I was going to comment on, 2008 Topps update and highlights. So that's Scherzer and Kershaw's year is $800 a box. I think it's actually a pretty good deal.
Yeah,
and 2014 Topps update is $800. That is DeGrom and Mookie's year. So talking about those wax prices a little bit, like how do you feel about wax? If things are, to me, when you think about 90s, you think about Junks wax era, 90s boxes of cards are $30-$40.
Yeah.
Like, do you think we're ever is that ever gonna happen here, or do you think that we're a little more protected?
I think we're more protected because of the lottery card that might be in every box, right? I think somebody posted recently that the Juan Soto Superfractor, the Chrome Superfractor auto still hasn't been found. So it's like, you're buying Chrome boxes. You could literally have a $1 million card sitting in one of those boxes, right? So I think that's a big difference, right? Whereas, you open 89 Upper Deck and you might get 4 Griffies, all of them off center, completely worthless. And there's nothing else in there, right? I think they had some sort of Ted Williams I think it was Ted Williams thing in there that you could win, but it's incredibly rare. But you might I think that the parallel thing that they did, and the numbered cards and the colors and all that stuff is really, whoever figured that stuff out is a genius. I think that changed the hobby, and I think that will keep the box prices relatively stable. I think wax is an amazing investment. In terms of buying it myself, I mean, I watched your break the other night with the 2018 hobby box, and I was just like, this is this is terrible. It was frightening, really, that the box could go for the price it does, and what you get out of it is four great base cards,
right?
So
to me, that's kind of to be honest, the reason I did sell that was for some holiday funds, one, but then for two, I worry about that 18 update, 135,000 cards submitted. Like, is it gonna stay right about there for a long time? Because let's just knock on wood here, but if Soto has an injury or Soto falls off a bit, Acuna's already got a torn up knee. We already know what happened to Gleiber. Otani his UCL could go out. I mean, just it's a very volatile group as well with the high pop. Just a lot of risk on that wax, and was my mind. But yeah, I think like 2011 wax, that'd be great to hold that long term. You know,
Definitely. Yeah.
just keep that. So, couple of just kind of questions. We kind of talked about this one already a little bit, but like junk slab versus junk wax. So I think those terms are used as one and the same, but they're not. I
No.
think people need to understand that junk wax is basically it's worthless to open these cards. They're not worth much. You have no chance. But junk slab is all these slabs that aren't worth the plastic they're in. I think to me, we are in a junk slab era of 2020 graded cards, all the ones we talked about.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's a big difference, and I think that as collectors, we just have to be more mindful of what we're subbing
Yeah.
and to still have fun in the hobby. Kind of
Yeah.
what's your take?
I agree 100%. I mean, I sent in, I have three subs at PSA right now, all sent in early last year. And I got a little pop up the other day saying that one was almost ready. And I looked through the cards and I was just like, what, what did you do early 2021, Rob Kent? It was just, um, so yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting things is it feels to me like the hobby is coming around to understanding what you just said, that you shouldn't be subbing every card that could be subbed. Um, but I think we're probably like a full year of people getting those subs back of a Rosarania base cards and whatever. And so and people are going to keep trying to sell those cards. Obviously, I'm going to try to sell mine when they come.
Yeah,
Um, so it's like we're I wonder if we can get through that 12 months of I'm not so much worried about the market sort of being oversaturated by stuff. It's more just like, can people mentally just say to themselves, look, I made a mistake, but now I understand and I'm going to do something different? Or are they going to say, F this hobby
right.
sucks.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I'm just liquidating my stuff and getting out of here.
I think there'll be some people with the latter, what you said there for sure, because
Yeah.
and we'll talk about Luis Robert. Luis Robert's first couple PSA 10 rookie cards, the papers were $250 to $300.
Yeah.
And now they're 40, 35.
Yeah.
And he actually played decent when he came back.
Yeah.
And so I just think that that's going to frustrate people seeing that type of, craziness in terms of pop and all those things. But I'm with you 100%. I think that as PSA catches up and all those things happen and they raise prices of grading, I think it's going to make it harder on people to just sub everything and hope to get $100 off every card that's a 10, which isn't realistic anymore.
Yeah.
To me, I kind of ran through this in my head getting ready for the show. It seems like we kind of went through like this phase in the hobby over the last 7-8 years. Like the first phase was getting awesome raw cards that you sold at peak price because they were great cards, to grading base cards and those rookie cards and making 3 to 4x because they're graded on that card, to now it's not that simple. It's got to be get a nice raw card, check the pop, evaluate the card, and sub it selectively to make sure that you can maximize your profit. The process has just gotten so more detailed that like us giving you guys these numbers right now of pop reports is we're trying to help you collect better. And I think that that's where everybody's starting to understand is that we have to do that. And the pop reports are even a little bit blurry, Rob, because we have 7 grading companies now popping out cards. That's right. So, I mean, I know they're not close to PSA's volume, but that's still a little chunk of cards somewhere else that we have to account for. Yeah. So
that's a great point. Yeah. It's much worse than this.
Yes. And to kind of segue into that, kind of one of our final questions here is, how will grading be going forward once PSA like opens in your mind? And I mean, what I mean by that is in terms of price, in terms of the volume they're going to receive, and then also the other grading companies also operating within them. Like, how do you kind of see grading going forward?
I think that's the $1 million question. It's so hard to say. I think people expected a bigger drop with PSA closing, and it didn't really happen. I think it's been a nice, slow, sort of steady drop, and I think people expected just like a complete collapse of the market. I'm wondering, like, are people just sort of continually accumulating cards? Do people have these gigantic stacks at home, just waiting for PSA to open up? It's so hard to even speculate on what's going on. I do think that SGC has made enough headway already, and they still have 3, 4, maybe 6 months still to go, where they will be the number 2 grading company, even when PSA and BGS opens up. I think BGS has really shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah,
And
they missed the opportunity for sure.
yeah, 100%. And I think they pissed everybody off. And
Yeah,
SGC has become really beloved, I think, by people. And I read something the other day. They were saying, that once people start with one grading company, they tend to stay with them. And so over, the last however long it's been now, a year, I guess, or 8 months, people have subbed with SGC, and they're going to keep subbing with SGC.
right. I
So
saw
I
my first
think,
stuff coming out too. Yeah,
yeah,
with them.
and I think the gap between SGC and PSA will shrink. It's about 65-70% right now. I think we could easily see it up to around 80, even 85%. I don't think they'll ever be completely aligned, but I think that's where the opportunity is for grading right now. In terms of PSA, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I read something new every week. Nat Turner was on a show a couple weeks ago, and he said his goal is to get grading down to $10 a slab. It's just like, how many people are you going to have working there?
Is it going to be like the door shuts at a certain amount? They're always going to be full. Nobody's
Yeah,
going to slide in. Like, what's going to happen? Are you going to get another million plus backlog again? Like, yeah, I don't know.
exactly.
That sounds a little bit scary to me too.
Yeah. What do you think? What's your take on this?
I
I don't
just
have a
think
good
that,
one.
to me, I think that it got into, I think Ty said this really well on his show, that people basically graded cards through PSA was printing money. They
Yeah.
just threw cards into PSA. They came back. They're worth at least $100, maybe more. And they sold them happy as clams, only like $20 to sub. And that's changed. And so
Yeah.
to me, I think that there's going to be a kind of a divide of I hate to say flipping, but the selling only piece is not going to be as clear. And I think that SGC is going to be a good option. I think that people, like for me, I have no problem putting a PC card in an HGA slab or a CSG. I don't like too much, but SGC, like a lot of the cards I'm subbing them is PC because I just want to see what they look like first. I might sell them, but I think that a lot of these other options people might use for PC cards. So it might change the avenues as well until some of these guys get the value that people want to see.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's going to be about, if PSA does get to $10, yeah, they're going to be full all the time. There's no way. But if they're a little bit more expensive than SGC or a little more expensive, people will probably stay with SGC. So it's going to be about their price and about the volume they can take in and how long people wait. Because the other thing, I'm not going to get on this spiel too much, but the thing that really frustrates me in the grading community is that the lifers of PSA will hammer all these companies for these small mistakes or these different things, but nobody's complaining about PSA held your cards for 18 months.
No,
like
that's amazing.
I mean, the money that I lost at PSA, I've had 15 Roberts, didn't get it for 18 months, just go to 250 down to 40, that's kind of a big deal. Like, how can you just be okay? How can you be okay with that? So, but I digress in terms of that opinion, but I just think that people are going to try their grading companies, and I think PSA's number and how much cards they can take at once will kind of also have a ripple effect with the other companies.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Do you have like a big stack of cards that you're waiting for PSA to open? Like if PSA opened tomorrow, would you be subbing? Like at a like say $30 a card?
I guess I do have, I would say I have about probably 30 to 35 higher end cards that I know are worth subbing.
Okay.
And then like in terms of, like a couple color parallels here and there, but I would say 30 to 35 that I'd be interested in seeing to PSA right now. Like I have like a green Novel Marte auto that's just been sitting, that's clean, that's ready to go.
Yeah. Why do you have to keep talking about that?
Yeah. So a couple things like that. But in my mind too, I'm just not sold on like everything doesn't have to PSA for me. So I'm going to kind of wait and see where it's at. I'm not just set going PSA. I would say I was pretty hard into BGS in the beginning of my collecting, and I'm kind of hard off of BGS. I almost want to sell everything I have in a BGS slab. Yeah. I just think that the other companies are doing more for people. They're just more accurate. I'm kind of gravitating away from BGS altogether.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's my sense of the sentiment of it in the hobby right now.
Yeah. But yeah, Rob, thanks for coming on the show. I thought of great information. I really appreciate you coming on. You want to plug your show where people can find your content and find you, and then we'll head out.
Sure. Thanks. I do a show every Monday. It's called the Flagship Baseball Card Podcast. like I said in the beginning, it's really numbers based. If you're a numbers guy or girl, this is definitely a baseball card show that you will enjoy. Try to keep everything as straightforward and as sort of unsentimental as possible. Yeah, I'm also on Twitter, Flagship Podcast, and that's pretty much everything for me. Thank you so much for having me on the show. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. That was great. Listeners and watchers of the show on YouTube, feel free to put comments on YouTube. We'll get back to you and I'd love to chat. Or like Rob said, follow us at our Twitter handles here at @numbers_behind and at Flagship Podcast. We love to talk baseball cards anytime. So we really appreciate you guys listening. Thanks again, Rob. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.